Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on Episode 8 of The Familiar of Zero, Night of the Twin Moons. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So, last we left off, Saito and company managed to delve into this little repository of government records, and in so doing, they still didn't really find what they were looking for. You know, very unfortunate, but it's the case. And it really does seem like this thread of that village being burned down is going to keep going, seeing as how we are apparently witnessing it, and perhaps even learning the identity of the captain responsible. I mean, I can only assume that the guy ultimately responsible for this whole thing is the guy who says that he loves the smell of burning flesh, which I'm given to understand it's a disgusting smell. So if you like that, it's pretty much over for you in terms of basic humanity. Now, I guess it's no small surprise that Menville here, for that is his name, is allied with Sheffield, who is, I guess, sort of the successor to Cromwell. Yeah, you know, it's probably not a good sign when, notorious person burner is aligning with, usurper of the rightful authority of a country. And I guess more to the point, this guy's being given a task here. He's not being given the task of recapturing a port or anything, but even if he were, that doesn't matter. He's just interested in burning. But worse than could be reasonably expected, Sheffield tasks him with attacking the Magic Academy. Now, normally during the opening theme, I would sit quietly with reverence, but today I am obligated to my sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than myself. You may not know this, but I write light novels, and I've written quite a few. Today, I'm going to tell you about the eccentric detective Yamamoto, in which the intrepid, if drunken, detective solves a wide variety of cases with the help of her assistant Satoshi. Ranging from finding missing pets and surveilling cheating spouses to catching a high-end cat burglar and preventing the murder of a local business magnate, no case is too big or too small for Detective Yamamoto. Even when she's forced to work with, and occasionally against, the police, and even when she must contend with her fear of the supernatural, nothing will prevent the eccentric detective from doing what needs to be done to solve the case. If this sounds like something you'd like to read, then by all means, consider purchasing books in the Eccentric Detective Yamamoto series by me, Frederick Fitzgerald, through Amazon. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the episode. So, on the one hand, a notorious person burner coming to the Tristane Academy of Magic is a bad thing, but on the other hand, this really gives Agnes an opportunity to redeem herself here. And I guess maybe more to the point, it gives Colbert another chance to save her, which I reckon will be for the third time. Now, of course, Louise, Saito, and everyone else are unaware of what's about to descend on them, and that said, it seems like Louise's sister is getting up to trouble here. You know, having, essentially kidnapped her sister through magic. And, whoa boy, Saito's taking his sweet time doing something, oh dear indeed. I would have thought that upon witnessing something like this, he would just sort of jump into action and do something, but sadly, I guess that's not the case. Now, surely Eleanor has a good reason for why she's doing this, right? Surely that would be the case. You know, she's not just picking on Louise, literally lifting her out of her bed and taking her to, what would appear to be a cell. Ooh. So Eleanor is, essentially locking her in here, and, it seems Louise did something to spur this on, but something tells me Eleanor might be being, just a wee bit unreasonable. Although that said, if Louise was sort of talking back to the musketeers, I don't know, maybe there's something to it. I don't know, it really is sort of hard to say, because on the one hand, I get why the musketeers are here and training and all that, but they are sort of overstepping boundaries by forcing all the mages to train too. Like, it's not their role, as it were. Okay, so I guess Louise isn't necessarily causing a problem. The idea is that, oh no, I think this is where things are gonna go bad. Agnes just sort of, carelessly lets slip that Her Highness is going to be on the front lines along with the rest of them. So I reckon Louise probably has something untoward to say about that. I mean, Louise seems like largely unaffected. Oh, alright, I take that back. I guess she's willing to go to the front lines. I mean, good on her when you get down to it, but it is sort of, reckless. And what's worse, it was Saito who spilled all this. I get why he did, but it is sort of a violation of trust here. So I guess Louise being locked in this dungeon, like, it really is kind of the rational thing. From Eleanor's perspective, her sister is totally incapable of doing anything, and therefore she would really only be marching to her death, so it makes sense to lock her up. What she doesn't know is that Louise is actually far more capable than anyone previously thought possible, but, it's not exactly something she can do right away, Man. That is sort of, rude and uncharacteristically cruel. And I guess what's worse about this whole thing is that Louise is just locked in here by her lonesome, I would have thought Eleanor would at least lock Saito in with her or something, but, oh dear. Alright, Saito might be screwing the pooch here, because he's just explicitly disagreeing with Louise and taking Eleanor's side. It seems to me that it's not exactly his place to do that as a familiar. Like, I get why, his impulse is the correct thing to do, but at the same time, I feel like he should probably avoid siding with an outsider, as it were, Surely he could do something else to subtly prevent Louise from doing something reckless, right? Like, he doesn't have to be part and parcel to locking her in the dungeon, I mean, realistically, Saito could do what Colbert's doing right now, sort of walking step by step through the logic here. It's like, look, if you go to war, that means you're either gonna have to kill people or you will die. There's no getting around it. And, killing is a difficult thing, It's not something you should really want to do. It's not something you should really have to do. But if you do have to do it, you will pay a cost for it, if only that you'll no longer be able to sleep well at night, haunted by the stuff you were forced to do. And, like, I get why, one, Louise isn't necessarily prepared for that, and two, Colbert would be willing to side with other people sort of wrangling her to prevent this. Unfortunately, however, it seems as though people might have to get a taste for killing whether they like it or not, with these, obviously evil people descending on the academy, Like, I get why Colbert might be so pacifistic as not to kill them, but, sometimes you do have to kill. It's unpopular to say, and Colbert would certainly disapprove, but, I don't know. I don't think it's a bad thing to kill evil people, especially if doing so would prevent them in the act of committing further evil. I mean, I guess case in point, they're already fair game, seeing as how they've, struck down 2 musketeers, Oh dear. Well, I guess make that 3, with the third one having been burnt, like, yeah, I think it's pretty fair game to just, like, kill these guys on sight. Not that any of the students would really have the impulse to do so necessarily, but, I guess if the alternative is allowing the academy to be despoiled, and that's kind of putting it mildly, I assume, then, I don't know. I feel like their lives are an exceedingly small price to pay. So, fortunately, some of the students are getting up and doing things. Unfortunately, it may not be enough. Agnes is up and able to fight, but I don't know. I feel like really only the Musketeers are going to be able to get the drop on anyone, and maybe Kirsch and Tabitha, but Saito's wholly unprepared, and I guess based on what happened earlier, I don't exactly trust his reflexes. At least Colbert is, paying attention here. He can probably hear the sounds of atrocity going on upstairs, and, maybe he's not exactly willing to kill, but I reckon if push came to shove, he's at least willing to fight, I would think a man that's thought things through to the degree that he's displaying would obviously come to realize that doing nothing is the bigger crime here, especially if you witness anything of what's going on upstairs. The various students being marched out of their rooms in their nightwear at wand point, as it were. Obviously nothing good is going to come of this, so, if something bad has to happen, it's better that bad things happen to bad people. And I guess Agnes already does sort of realize the gravity of the situation. If someone's attacking the academy, they're obviously not good, but they're also taking hostages, which, doesn't exactly bode well. Because these people aren't likely to be negotiated with to any real capacity. Especially not while they still have the upper hand, which they apparently do. I guess the big question is, what happens with Saito and Louise? Because surely Saito should go and help, but at the same time, I don't know whether or not he could leave Louise where she is. Because on the one hand, she might well be safer there, but on the other hand, suppose people start investigating the basement, If she's there by herself, that's decidedly not good. So I do find it a little interesting that we just sort of flash forward to see both Giulio and the headmaster captured. I would have imagined they would have a little bit more fight in them, but given that this all happened off-screen, I can only assume that they were confronted with hostages and therefore were forced to surrender post-haste. I don't necessarily like it, but I do understand why Osmond, I guess, would at least do that. Him being responsible for the student body. Oh dear. So, it's always good to threaten to burn people to death. That, normally calms people down. So, I reckon things are probably going to escalate. Good on Osmond for offering himself as a hostage, but, yeah. I guess I sort of assumed that there are other motives here, Alright, well, good on Eleanor and Katlia. At least, they're offering up themselves as hostages. That's something, at least, being, daughters of noble birth and all that, but, unfortunately, it really seems like it was for nothing, These guys are really only interested in having as many hostages as possible. So I guess at this point, Louise, Saito, and Colbert are really the only people who can do much of anything, They're the only ones, not really accounted for. Because, the Musketeers can do something, but, given by how they've acquitted themselves so far, I'm not exactly optimistic about it. I guess Agnes is taking the direct approach here, saying, look, we've got you surrounded, release the hostages. So if she and her forces sort of keep everyone distracted on that front, then perhaps Colbert, Saito, and Louise can get the drop on them in another way. Maybe they're not exactly coordinating on this plan, but it might just, shape up that way. So I guess this is where things might get kind of interesting, asking the people from Albion what exactly they want. And based on what Melville said so far, like, he really just wants to, sort of stick it to the queen, kind of, or at least give her something else to think about while she's marching off to war. So, really, a demoralization tactic. And, yeah, I get it, that's, potent, but I reckon that also means he probably doesn't have any real coherent demands beyond, everyone suffering as much as possible. So at this point, I feel like Saito and Louise really do have to sort of leap into action here, because Melville's seen through what the Musketeers were doing, and he's basically probably just going to handily defeat them. So I guess the question remains, how much can Louise do? Because surely she can cast like some magnificent void spell, but in order to do that, Saito's probably going to have to buy her a fair bit of time, and I don't know, against these mercenaries, I don't know, I guess. He may not necessarily be able to buy enough time. I guess it's sort of different from Viscount Ward's before, because that guy, he was a tactician and he was, a capable warrior, but against like a bunch of people who have no compunctions about doing evil things, even more so than the Viscount, and there being many of them, I don't know if Saito necessarily has the cunning necessary to keep up with them, especially when they've displayed that they have no real hesitation to do dirty and underhanded things. So this is something, he recognizes that despite this being a magic academy of no strategic importance, nominally, there is a musketeer force stationed here, so, something's gotta be going on. And without hazarding much of a guess, he does recognize that the mages trained here become the nobility later, so, in a sense, if you kneecap the future nobility now, then the country of Tristane will be effectively crippled, because war is sort of like a game of the nobility. Yeah, you do have cannon fodder, I assume, that are peasants, but everyone leading the war effort are noble, generally by default, and I don't know, there's something to that. If you run out of nobles, then the people who are trained for war aren't in charge of it anymore, and that's when things get kind of dicey. So, at this point in time, Agnes is only aware that this guy is a hostage taker and generally probably not a great guy. However, I feel like he's going to let something slip here about how much he really enjoys burning down villages and killing all residents. I mean, he's already sort of alluded to it that hey, I'd rather just burn everything down, but I feel like that's not exactly on the nose enough to tip off Agnes. Although I feel, once he makes it clear, she's probably going to be even less effective fighting him than before. Yeah, I think it's sort of shaping up. He's talking about how he loves burning things, and that's the great thing about war. You can kill people and butcher. But, I guess judging by, the sound effects of, a big heartbeat, I can only assume that Agnes is on the verge of panic rather than, finding the resolve to beat this guy. Well, maybe I misjudged her. She certainly seems angry, but I feel like, as is frequently the case in reality, it's not going to help her in the long run. If anything, she might get a little too reckless for her own good and end up becoming a hostage herself. I could see that happening with her becoming a hostage and Louise and the others forced to sort of liberate her along with the rest. Now that's interesting. Kirsch and Tabitha, they're just showing up now, which, indicates to me they took their sweet time. I get you don't exactly want to, jump right in and start causing trouble, lest you create more trouble than it's worth, but at the same time, I don't know, that seems sort of, I hesitate to say cowardly, but, I don't know, self-serving, I guess. Perhaps it would have been better if they'd just, gotten to work. So unfortunately for Agnes, she's not exactly doing great, and I feel like if things are to work out for her, it would probably be best if Saito and the others intervened probably now, you know. I mean, I guess to their credit, they're taking stock of things like, okay, there's a bunch of these guys, they have a bunch of hostages, they're all skilled, so, I don't know. The prognosis isn't exactly good. So, I guess the question is, now that Colbert's here, what's he gonna do? You know, he sent a message to the outside for reinforcements, but he's telling them to leave. And I get that, you know, he doesn't want to be nominally responsible for them getting into trouble. But, what's he gonna do then? You know? Like, surely he's capable of something, but, I guess we don't exactly know what his capabilities are, if in fact he's going to do anything. Ooh, okay. So Kirsch, I feel, is probably touching a nerve here, saying like, look, you know, we have no use for a coward. Which is true enough, but, we don't necessarily know that Colbert was acting out of cowardice. You know, it could be that he just genuinely cares about the students and doesn't want to see them come to harm. You know, for all we know, he was planning on intervening alone. Ooh. Alright, so, good old Melville here, he wasn't the captain at all, but he has revealed the identity of the captain. So, that's something. It seems like the captain's disappeared. That's interesting. You know, for someone who enjoys burning villages, to say that the captain is even more cruel than himself, that's really something, you know. That's indicative of a truly awful person. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.